Welcome to Sunday School. I'm Elder Robert Wilson. Thank you once again for allowing Sunday School to be a part of your regular schedule. Now, our subject today is Daniel's vision for change. Daniel's vision for change. We were looking at Daniel chapter 7, verse number 9 through 14. Now, Bible truth says, God judges the just and the unjust. The just and the unjust. One day we will be called before God, and we will have to give an account for the life that we lived, whether it was good or bad. So that all-seeing, all-powerful, all-knowing God, we will have to stand before Him. So whether our life is good or bad, God is going to separate the right from the wrong. So God judges the just and the unjust. Now, our lesson actually begins in verse number 9. But let's back up a little bit and see what brought us to this point. Now, Daniel is describing what he saw in his dream or this vision that he had. So in verse 1 it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and vision of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matter. So Daniel began to have this dream or this vision and began to write out what he had saw in this dream and perhaps what it meant. So in verse 2 it said, he saw the four winds of the heavens go up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. They was different from any other beast. They wasn't the same. Verse 4 said, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wing. I beheld till the wing therefore were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man. And a man's heart was given to it. Verse 5 says, and behold, another beast, a second, like a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three ribs in its mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon his back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast had also four heads, and dominion was given to it. Verse 7 said, after this I saw the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And verse 8 says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were three of the first horns plucked up by the root. And behold, in this horn were eyes, the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking great things. So all this led up to verse 9. All these things that Daniel saw in his vision. Now these beasts and these horns represent earthly rulers and earthly kingdoms that will have dominion and power. And especially those that have dominion and power over the people of God, over the church. So when we get to verse 9, it says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whom garments were white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Now here, Daniel began to talk about what he saw. All these beasts and all these thrones. He watched until they were cast down. He stayed in the vision. He watched until all of them were cast down. And then he said, and the Ancient of Days, and the Ancient of Days is God. The Ancient of Days did sit, and he began to describe God. He said, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair on his head was like pure wool. We know that that has to be God. And his throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheel as burning fire. Now in verse 10, it begins to describe the throne of God. It said in verse 10, a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. So he described this kingdom of God, or this throne of God, as being one of fire, a fiery kingdom. And it said, thousand and thousand ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the books were opened. Now, what was in these books? There was two books. One was the book of life, and one was the book of judgment. And these books were open, so the court was set. So the judgment was about to be made final. In verse 11, he said, I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. Now Daniel speaks out about this fourth beast, and this beast had 10 horns. He talks about this in verse number 7. And he said this beast was terrible, he was frightening, and he was powerful. Now, while Daniel was watching the procedures of the court, while he was watching the procedures of the court, a sound came forth out of one of the horns. Out of one of the 10 horns, a sound came forth. Now it cried out boastfully, and it cried out in defiance of God, in defiance of the kingdom of God. So he watched till this beast was slain. This beast was slain, and his body was destroyed, and it was given to the burning flames. Verse 12 said, and concerning the rest of the beast, remember this wasn't the only beast. So the rest of the beasts had their dominion taken away. Yet their life was prolonged for a season and time. Now we heard this before when Jesus came down and he bound up Satan. He didn't take Satan's life, but he bound him up for a season and a time. He bound them up for a season and a time. So these angels, well, not angels, but these beasts, their dominion was stripped from them, but their life wasn't taken from them. So they was prolonged for a season and a time. Now, when we get to verse 13, verse 13 tells about the future hope for God's people. So in this verse 13, Daniel began continued talking. He said, I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Now, when it mentioned the Son of Man, it is talking about Jesus. So here he sees the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Now, this is the way Jesus described himself in Matthew chapter 8, verse 20. He said, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So this is how Jesus described himself, the Son of Man. Now, verse 14 says, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So after all this was done, after all the beasts were called up before God in judgment, all the power and dominion was stripped from him. And then Jesus appeared before the Ancient of Days, which is God. And there in the presence of God, God gave him dominion. God gave him glory. God gave him a kingdom that all the people of the world will serve him. That all the people of the world should serve him. Remember, the Bible tells us that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord of all. So this kingdom that God gives unto the Son of Man, which is Jesus, it's an everlasting kingdom. It's an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. And this kingdom and his kingdom will not only not pass away, but it shall not be destroyed. There is nothing that can come against it. Not even those beasts with those horns, those earthly kingdoms, those earthly rulers. They could not come against the dominion of Jesus or the kingdom of Jesus. So what do this mean to us today? What is this vision saying to us today? It said long before Jesus came, long before he died on the cross and was buried, long before he was risen and now sitting on the right hand of God. God had a planned day. He had a called day that all of our adversaries, all of those that were in defiance of God, defiance of the people of God, defiance of the church, will have a day that they will have all their power stripped, all their dominion stripped, and they will be placed under our feet. This is said to us before Jesus died, before he came to this earth. God had a plan for us, an everlasting plan for his people and the church. The beast and the horn of our society, these earthly kingdoms and these earthly rulers, they will have a day that God has called them to answer for the life that they live, for the life that they oppress the church, to oppress God's people, being in defiance of God. God has called a day for them. And God is going to separate the right from the wrong. We said in our Bible truth that God judges the just and the unjust. This will be a time which we are looking at in Daniel's vision, that God is going to separate the just from the unjust. He's going to make the unrighteous pay for the oppression that they had toward the church. See, we have we've been troubled. We've been troubled on every side. But God has not allowed us to be in distress. We've been cast down by this earthly kingdom, this earthly rulership. But God has not let us be destroyed. Through all the things that we have suffered, God has called us to have an expected end. And this is our hope, is that all things work together for good for them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. So let's keep that hope.